What's up? Today we're going to be talking about the top 3 most common, most annoying errors that prevent you from playing consistently and climbing that rating ladder. Now, how do I know what those common errors are? Well, coaching people for so many years and coaching so different people, I would be an idiot not to notice the patterns, right? I coached kids, adults, national teams, beginners, grandmasters, and everything in between, right? So I do know what I'm talking about, and I love to share these 3 most common ideas, most common errors, and I do hope that after you get rid of them, your chess progress is going to be a lot smoother. Let me start with a quick example, and I'd love to ask you a question so that you can think about this and tell me which move you would play in this position. So let's start off with this kind of more or less standard moves, and in this position, black played a seemingly weird move, bishop takes f2. Well, it is indeed weird. Of course, black is losing the bishop for nothing. Queen e7. Now, here is the position. It is white to play. How would you play here if you're white? Just think about this for a couple seconds, and then you can come up with your move. Now, what's remarkable about this position is that although right now white is just up a piece and should be completely winning, but more than 50% of white players who reached this position blundered in one move. So they played something like rook to f1, trying to prepare for this artificial castling, or rook to e1 with the same purpose, or knight to c3 to develop the knight, or any other move, and it's all nice, but that blunders the black's move queen to c5. So after whatever move of white, let's say rook f1, black goes queen to c5, and that is a double attack to the king and bishop, and black wins the bishop on the next move. Now, this may seem like, well, white just blundered something, but it is a symptom of a larger problem that occurs across many different positions. And the real cause of this is that we are usually occupied by our own plans and intentions, and I call it selfish thinking. It is when you just think about your own plans and ideas, and you don't give equal say to your opponent. You don't really care about his or her ideas as much, right? And for example, when you analyze a position with a computer with Stockfish, it learns us to be objective, to find proper moves both for white and for black. So in this position, what I would recommend is that before playing your move, let's say you intend to play rook to f1, you can ask yourself, what are the attacking moves of my opponent? Can he cause any trouble for me? You don't have to care about all the potential moves, right? If you play rook f1 and your opponent plays knight c6, you don't have to worry about that. It's just a developing move. It doesn't change much. Or if black goes d6 or knight f6 or whatever. But you got to ask yourself this question, how can my opponent attack me? So mainly, how can he check me or capture something or play an attacking move? So those are the questions you got to think about. And even more so, let's take this back. After your opponent just played a move queen to e7, you could have paid attention to your opponent's move for a second and ask yourself, hey, what's the idea? Why did he play that move? And you see that there aren't that many options behind this move besides playing queen c5 on the next move. So if you took that 1 second asking yourself, like, what's the idea of my opponent's move? Why is he playing that? Not just thinking that he's playing weird moves, but actually taking a little time to ask yourself that question. You would definitely figure out black's intent queen c5. It's pretty obvious. Now let's move on to an endgame, and the second most common error is not activating your king in an endgame or not prioritizing it enough. So let me illustrate it with this example, because it's not actually all that intuitive, and let me explain the point. So what do you think about this position? Well, it's completely symmetric, the material balance is equal, it's gotta be a dead draw, right? Absolutely. Now, let me make a little shift in the position. Let me make white's king slightly closer to the center. Let's say white already centralized the king and it is currently standing on e2. Okay, so I applied the magic, now the king is on a2. And what do you think about this position? White's winning. So that's the difference. I mean, in this case, if it's white to play, white's going to keep moving the king forward. Let's say king to d3. And let's say black plays something or tries to do the same. Now we move the king forward. And as the king reaches the d5 square, now we completely dominate. Black has nothing to do. And all white needs to do is to reposition his knight in the future to d3 or e4, and then capture this pawn on c5. And with an extra pawn, you're going to simply promote your pawn in the future, and black is completely defenseless. So just because your king standing 2 squares closer to the center, that turned the position from being completely drawish into completely winning effortlessly for white. So that's how critical centralization of your king in an endgame is. So let me give you one more example. Okay, it is white to move once again. What's the evaluation of this position? Well, if it's white to play, white's going to play pawn to a4, and black can't stop this pawn from being promoted, so white is winning. There is that useful rule of the square that you're going to need to draw this kind of a square, and then if your opponent's king can step into this square, it can catch the pawn. If not, the pawn will be promoted. So in this case, black cannot bring his king into the square, and so the pawn will be promoted, and white's going to win this. Now, let me make once again a subtle shift. Let me make black's king to f8 in the starting position of this example. Okay, once again, I made this little shift in the position. Now, what's the evaluation of this position? Well, black is winning. Now, black's king is able to catch the white's pawn here, and so because black has so much of the pawns on the king side, he's going to simply move them forward and promote them. Black is completely winning. Okay, so again, such a little shift, but when your king is centralized, it can quickly be brought to any part of the board, and it gives you a lot of flexibility of what you can do or what you cannot do if it's not centralized. So once again, the very common error is not centralizing your king in an endgame, or not paying too much attention to this as much as you should. Now let me share with you another quick game between two amateur players that will also illustrate some common issues on this level. And actually, they're not even beginners there on 1900 rating level. So let's say we started with a move pawn e4, pawn e5. So far, so good. Knight f3, like played pawn h6. Not the best move, but so far it's not a decisive error. By the way, if you're playing this as black, I would recommend another video where I'm sharing with you some hidden line in the two knights game, how you can take over the position and win in many nice games. So you can check this out later. For now, let's come back to the current game. Black played this inferior move pawn to h6, but for now, okay, let's not be too harsh on black. Pawn d4 and exchange in the middle of the board. And here, just think about this for a second also. How do you play here as black? If you're playing this game, it is your move to play, how would you play here? One of the very common errors in this position, as well as in many other positions, is just to trade pieces and to seek exchanges. So I call this rule to take is a mistake. So in this game, black took knight takes d4, and it's extremely common across many different openings. What's the problem? Well, as a beginner or intermediate level player, it feels easier to just trade off some pieces, make the position simpler so that it's easier for you to find proper moves. But the truth is, you only make it easier for your opponent, not for yourself, because you're actually making it harder for yourself when you execute such unmotivated exchanges. Again, to take is a mistake. So think about this. If we were to just remove these two knights from the board somehow magically, right, that would be just an equal exchange. But if you actually force this exchange, one more thing that you achieve by this is that you develop white's queen. So we did not just trade it off knights. You also help white bringing his queen forward, and now it's a lot more active. And actually right now, if we evaluate the current position, we can see that black is completely passive by now. White is already having some material in the middle of the board. White is quite active, and black's already in trouble. Like, what can black do? I mean, black cannot develop this bishop. If black ever moves this bishop, they're going to hand this pawn on g7 because white has such an active queen, right? In the game, instead, they played knight f6, following one more common error that we talked about previously. Selfish thinking when you don't think too much about your opponent. So it is natural that black needs to develop their pieces in an opening, and in that sense, knight f6 is a perfectly fine move, but you gotta ask yourself, what are the attacking moves that white can play now? And if black asks himself that question, he would found that pawn e5 brings this knight back instantaneously and kind of refutes the move knight f6, right? So again, you can't just play your moves, you have to think about your opponent as well. But in this position, as black player was quite a strong player, 1900 rated player, he played a counter blow move pawn c5, which is another quite interesting and common error, but it actually goes along with this selfish thinking a little bit. So very often I notice that people play these one move attacking attempts, kind of hoping that things will turn out in their favor somehow, without really thinking about that too much, just hoping that, okay, let me get rid of this annoying queen, and if it goes back, let's say to d1, maybe my knight can go forward to e4 or something like this, right? So that's how a black player thinks. But when you play moves, you gotta anticipate stronger moves of your opponent, right? Not expecting them just to play some dumb mistakes, such as losing their queen in one move, like overlooking this move completely, or playing their queen to the most weird square. You have to expect that they can play a decent move. And in this game, actually c5 backfired because white played a more active move, queen f4, and it turns out that now black cannot move this knight at all, because then queen takes f7 is going to count with this kind of scholar's checkmate. So by playing this one move attacker, pawn c5, black actually ruined his position completely. But that's not the end of the story, because in this position, black played pawn g5, and it's a relatively popular move in this position according to the database, once again just hoping for the queen to go back so that your knight is free to go, but instead that hands the knight over here, so I can just grab the knight happily and win the game right away. So how come that a relatively strong player made these kind of blunders? It's not that, he could not comprehend that white can grab the knight. It's just that more of a wishful and selfish thinking when you just hope for things to turn out well for you. And it's natural for us humans to be optimistic, to hope for things to work out in our favor, to hope that, your opponent will not find the right move. But unfortunately in chess, you cannot do that way. I also tend to be overly optimistic, and it's good that I have people around me in my life who sometimes bring me down to earth and make me more realistic. But that's also what chess teaches us to do, to be more realistic in our assessment. And when you play a move, you got to ask yourself again, what are the attacking moves of white? Don't just assume they'll go back, right? Ask yourself, what are the attacking moves of white? Because if they go back, that's not a problem indeed. But if they move forward, attack you or capture something, that could be an issue, right? So that's what you got to care about and watch over. So before playing your move on the board, just ask yourself, can my opponent attack me or capture something? And that will clear a lot of blunders from you. Today we've been talking about things you should not do. You may be wondering what you should do. Well, that's of course a huge subject, and if you're curious about that, I've got a separate course called Top 25 Middle Game Concepts, where I analyzed a ton of different rules, ideas, and games of students, and picked those 25 most critical principles that cover basically 95% of the chess middle game positions. And if you master those 25 principles, then basically, for the most part, you master the middle game. And if you're curious, you may click the link below the video in the description and check it out right now. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and I'll be sure to follow up, and I'll talk to you soon.